it's Catherine from Jayne, Catherine and Books. I thought we'd have a change of scenery today, so we're in the office and my sewing room, and I'm here to do a fuller wrap up for I Know My Name. So it's I Know My Name, CJ Cooke, and excuse me, I've got an itch. And I said that I wanted to review it a little bit more in depth, but I couldn't really do that without spoilers. So this has got spoilers in, so if you haven't read the book yet or you don't want to know what happens, then please don't continue with the video. But to a greater extent, the ending is so unusual, perhaps a strange word to class it as, but I didn't know what the ending was, and so unless you actually perhaps have this condition or have heard about this book before, then you would have no idea. I went into this not knowing anything about it really, apart from the fact that a wife goes missing, leaves the children behind, and the plot continues from there. So here we go. I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was a fantastic book. It is a thriller. Yeah, I would say it's a thriller. I don't think you can class it as psychological. There's a little bit of we can't say that there's not psychological elements in there, like psychology of illness, etc., but not, you know, as we know, psychological thrillers where there's all strange things going on. The mother goes missing, as I said. She's called Eloise. And Lachlan, who's the husband, he's a Scottish he's in financial, the top financial institutes in London, but he does work in Scotland as well. And he gets a call from his elderly neighbour to say that the children are all alone in the house and Eloise is nowhere to be found. So obviously he comes rushing home and they just can't work it out. There's 2 young children. We've got Max, who's 4 or 5, and then a newborn baby, not that many weeks old, who is called Cassida. Or is it Cressida? Cressida. I want to call her Cassida. No, it's Cressida. And obviously that's not something that in normal circumstances a mother would go missing and leave her children behind. So straight away I'm thinking, goodness me, she's been kidnapped. I'm sure something's happened to her like that. She's been kidnapped. Something untoward has happened to her, rather than her walking out and leaving them. So you start thinking along those lines. I like the fact that the scene is set. It's very tense. You can feel Lachlan's distress. You can feel the children's distress. I did listen to this on audiobook, and as you know, I don't read that many on audiobooks, but I really enjoyed it. There were 2 narrators, male and female. So the female narrator was Eloise, and the characters, most of the characters that on the island, and then Lachlan was the male characters. And I think it built it up till you could feel that tension. And eventually a missing persons file was established with the police, and so the story takes on from there. Now I've put here, enter stage left, the grandparents, Eloise's grandparents. So we're now introduced to 2 more characters. We've got Eloise's grandparents, who are Swiss, and they've obviously come over to help the children. They're distressed because Eloise is missing. They can't work it out. But at this stage I've got, I don't know, I don't quite take to the grandfather, and I start to think, I wonder if he's something to do with it. He clearly doesn't like Lachlan. He clearly doesn't get on with him all that well. And so, you know, in the next few chapters after they arrive, I'm sort of thinking, I wonder if he's had her abducted out the way because he doesn't want her to be, he thinks she's safer without being with Lachlan. But that's how my mind got working. And yeah, I wasn't that keen on the grandfather. So then we go to Eloise, and she's been washed up. Looks like she's had some sort of boating accident. Washed up on a beach on a Greek island. I mean, we think, crikey, how the heck does she get to this Greek island from London, and what's she doing there? Anyway, she's found by a group of friends that have gone over to the island to do some writing. It's a bit like a writing sabbatical that they've gone on, and we're introduced to all the characters there. And yeah, there's some great characters. I like the characterizations of them all. Some were kinder than others. Some were a bit more forceful, and I got the impression that perhaps not everybody wanted her to be rescued. In a way, apparently they got a contact on the mainland in Greece who brought over food and supplies and came over with the boat. This island's called Komeno Island, and they have a satellite phone to get in touch with this guy, but because of the weather it's not easy to communicate with him. Now I'm then thinking, right, I think it's somebody dodgy on the island. They're not really putting themselves out to want her to be rescued, and why not? So you get thinking, right, perhaps then it's somebody on the island that has got a grievance with her or a husband. And so your mind starts drifting in another direction, which I think's great, because that to me is the essence of good writing. You know, a good mystery, a good thriller is getting your attention to go in different directions, like along red herring plots, as I like to call them, and starts getting your mind thinking, well, could he have done it, could she have done it, or is it this, that and the other? So that was great. Now what did we find out next? Let me just so then we start to be introduced to Eloise's backstory. And it takes you right back to when she was a little girl, and she lived with her mother, and she was a single parent, her mother, and they both lived comfortably with the grandparents, and they lived in Switzerland. These grandparents are wealthy. They had no issues for being cared for or being looked after, and we get to find out that her mother is a bit of an unsuitable character, really. She's not the best of mothers, and I think that the grandparents have had a long struggle with this daughter. She's been a bit wayward, I think, and she finds this new boyfriend who decides that they're going to move to London. And although the grandparents they're not really keen on the idea, they allow this to happen. Now, this is a bit, I think, crikey, why didn't they fight harder for this not to happen? They know that the daughter's not the most stable of people. I think she has got a bit of a drug addiction, alcohol problems, and they didn't seem to put up enough of a fight for me, but I don't suppose grandparents have more rights than the mother. So the mother takes Eloise, and she goes with this unsavoury boyfriend, really. He's not the best of characters either. And off they go to London, and it's there that we find out that Eloise is abused by this unsavoury boyfriend and some of his friends. And that was quite hard-hitting and quite emotional to read. Again, essence of good writing, in my opinion. And I was quite sad that Eloise had this childhood. I don't think we get to find out at this stage why she's back with the grandparents. And all that Lachlan knows, really, that she's been brought up by the grandparents because her mother, I think they said her mother died or something like that, and doesn't know too much else than that. So we have this going back in time, which is very interesting. You get an idea of what poor Eloise has suffered. So I'm then thinking, well, I wonder if she's got some postnatal depression or something like that. She's just had a new baby, and she's had a hard past. But then you start to wonder if it's Lachlan that's involved, because to be honest, he's a well-written character, but he annoys me at times. He's very much the alpha male. He's got this important career, you know, he's doing this big job, he's with this big financial institution, he earns loads of money, and at times doesn't give a second thought to the fact that Eloise had a career. They met at university. She, you know, she's given everything up to look after the children, and there's sometimes he's out at work for hours and hours and hours at a time and days at a time, and especially when he goes up to Scotland for 2 or 3 days a week. Poor Eloise is there manning the fort and trying to be all things to all people, and you do get that sense that he's a touch arrogant and needs a kick up the bum, I think. So then you start to think, wonder if he's done her in. Wonder if there's been a murder. And we then get to find out that there's something, he's been a bit of a naughty boy. Bit of a naughty boy is our Lachlan. And he nearly had an affair, shall we say. He'd been getting quite close to a colleague of his at work, and they got to a stage in their relationship where it was going to become sexual, and he backed off. Fortunately, he backed off and did the right thing and didn't cheat. However, this, how can we say, you never trust a woman scorned, never underestimate a woman scorned, is it that they say? And yeah, I think she thinks I'm going to get my own back here. I thought he really cared for me. And it turns out then that she's found a way of tapping into their camera security system in the home that's there for the protection of the children. You know, they're like child cams, that sort of thing. I mean, 25 years ago, when my boys were little, you know, they were a little Tommy, Tippy Tommy or whatever that you plugged in and you could hear them cry. If you think now how sophisticated they must be when, you know, the home is, they've got cameras and surveillance and everything now. But, you know, with that also comes the risk of, you know, it being violated, and this colleague tapped into it. So then we go through a whole stage of thinking, oh, crikey, it's not him then, it's her, it's this woman, she's nutty, you know, she's really lost the plot, she's abducted Eloise, and it's all because Lachlan didn't finish what they started. And you think, right, it's all wrapped up now, that's it, that's solved what's happened, we just need her to tell us where Eloise is. And you know, another red herring later, yeah, she's done wrong, but she hasn't got a clue where Eloise is. So we get to this stage in the book where I'm thinking, right, okay, there's 1 or 2 dodgy people on the island that's looking after Eloise. We do know that she used to be a very competent sailor back in her youth and back in her young adulthood. So, you know, you start thinking, well, how the heck did she get to Greece? So all little things like that go around in your mind. So I'm then back to thinking, has Lachlan done her in? What's the grandfather's involvement in all this? I like the grandmother, but she's very strict Swiss lady. She's very strong-minded. She doesn't always like to show her emotions, but I think she genuinely really cares for Eloise and she cares for her grandchildren. But at times she finds that hard to show. And I don't think she's over keen on Lachlan either. So we continue, the police are doing their investigations. They don't seem to be trying all that hard in some respects to me. And it's not a police procedural by any means. They're just involved in the background. The main of this is a family drama. You know, that we learn more about the children and how they're coping with it. Now, there is one thing that really irritated me on the audiobook, and that was the voice of Max, the little boy. Now, obviously, the male narrator was doing it, but it was, hello, Daddy, oh, Daddy, where's Mummy? Sorry if I'm pulling an awful face. I can't do daddy and mummy without pulling a face. And now Nelson's turned up thinking, what the heck is that awful? What is it, Nelson? What the heck is that awful noise my mummy's making? It really irritated me. But I did actually like the writing. I did like all the emotions that he went through because his mummy was missing, and he could be placated for so many days, but then, you know, even 5-year-olds start to wonder, don't they? So I liked, you know, it was quite true to form how I think a little boy of that age would be. It was just the voice, so obviously you don't get that in the book. It doesn't come clear for quite a while how she ended up with her grandparents. We've covered the work colleague. Now then. And then back to, right, yes, and then back to suspecting the grandfather. Because it turns out that the island, Comeno Island, is owned by the grandfather. So I was getting, oh yes, I was getting really excited. I thought, yeah, I've cracked the crime from the beginning. I thought it was this grandfather. You know, I thought there was something not quite right, that he wanted her out of the way. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought somebody on the island has been paid to look after Eloise on behalf of the grandfather. It's really strange that this island is deserted, really. There's nobody else there. There's this farmhouse where these friends are staying on a sabbatical, and it used to be quite a tourist place. There's a big hotel on the island that is all run down now, that again belongs to the grandfather. And so, you know, I was then back to thinking it was him. So can you see how this is the sort of, if you break down how this book is written and the different red herrings and plots and subplots that are going on, that's what I love about reading a thriller. Because, you know, sometimes I get to the end and I think, yes, I've definitely got it right. But there's many times you don't, because the art of the author's writing gets you thinking so many different emotions that you're not totally sure by the time you get to the end. And I think this is a very good example, really, of how the author's done that. Now, C.J. Cooke, I've not actually come across this author before. I mean, when did this come out? 2017? So it's not that old. Trying to think where she comes from. Oh, right. She is a researcher at Glasgow University. Wow. So, yeah, I don't think it's had enough airtime, really, on BookTube. I've certainly not seen anybody else talk about it. So, we carry on. We continue with the plot. So, I'm convinced it's the grandfather. Well, I certainly didn't see the end coming. Towards the end, we get this big crescendo of activity on the island. I feel that some of the characters are trying to help her escape, to see how she can get off the island. There's a male character that really is trying to stop her, doesn't want her to leave the island. He's the one that I'm thinking is working with the grandfather. And then, the ending. Now, for those obviously of you that have read it, the ending, although I did think that perhaps she'd got postnatal depression and she'd wandered off without realising she'd left her children, she got so much more wrong with her and a lot more of a complex mental illness. She got DID, which is dissociative identity disorder, as they call it now. I think it used to be called multiple personality disorder. And once you read more into it and some of the information that the book gives you, it all makes sense. Generally speaking, people that develop this mental health problem are seriously abused as a young child or experienced some very big disaster, trauma, that sort of thing. And what happens in the mind is that various alter personalities develop as like a safeguard for the mind, because it's far too painful for the people to revisit, to go back to actually that incident. And so they develop, and when I did, it's quite interesting to do further research and to certainly look on YouTube, and there's many people on there that are quite happy to discuss this condition. And some people have several of these alters, some people don't have many, one or two, and it's a matter of learning to live with them. I think it must be very distressing for them to have these different personalities that live their lives alongside them, really. So she has got this. It does make sense, doesn't it, really, that she had the trauma as a young age. She was constantly abused and sexually abused by this dodgy boyfriend of her mother's and all his friends, or we don't even know if it just get men paid to have sex with her, bless her. And so she has developed this, and her husband doesn't know. The only person that knows is a psychologist that they managed to track down, and obviously for the best interests of Eloise, she is allowed to break confidentiality. And that's basically, as a professional, we're allowed to break confidentiality if we feel that the person themselves are in danger or they are a danger to others. So we find from the psychologist that this is what she's been treated for in the past, and nobody knew about it. It can lay dormant where the alters don't always feel the need to protect the host person. I think that's, I hope I get that idea correctly from what I've seen so far. So, correct me if you have this and I'm wrong. And I think that this is a very important ending to this book. I didn't know that much about it, even though I'm a health professional, even though I've been a nurse for 40 years with a medical background. I've not specifically trained in mental health, and so I didn't see it coming. It may well be that mental health people, in the professionals might guess what was going on, but I certainly didn't. And I think generally the layperson reading this wouldn't have known this. So I thought it was absolutely gripping. I think it was very well written. I actually think that the aspects of the DID was sensitively covered. I felt that it was done in a way where you could see all the different alters, because as it turned out, all the alters were the people on the island. There was only Eloise on that island, but the author did a very good job of convincing me that all these other people were there, and even one of them was a baddie. Yes, so excellent. It sort of showed that stressful situations, and I suppose hormonal changes and the stress of having a new baby, having a 5-year-old, not having the husband there very much, had triggered this off, really. And obviously the alters had come to the fore to protect Eloise from, either doing a self-harm or the children harm. So in what's the word I was going to say then? In conclusion, that's it. In conclusion, I was going to say, in my resume, in conclusion, I thought it was an excellent plot. I thought the characters were all excellent. I think they acted in a way that I would have anticipated them to act in this situation. I think it was very true to form, true to life. For me, it had a satisfactory ending, and it was a wow ending for me. I didn't see that coming, and I'm sorry, poor grandfather, that I thought you'd done it all the way through. It raised my awareness of the condition of the dissociative identity, dissociative identity disorder. I think that's all that I've got to say about this book. Let me know if you've read it, what you thought, if you've got similar thought processes going through it that I did. And great book. I'm really pleased to have come across it, and certainly the audio book. So even if you've read it and you want to reread it at some time in the future, then have it on the audio, because it just gives you a different experience to everything that's going off, and especially all the characters really came to life. So comments down below, let me know, let's have a bit of a chat about this book. I'll be very interested on your views, and I'll see you again next time. Bye for now.